Well, good afternoon, folks, and thanks very much for attending the session here this afternoon. We're very, very pleased to have Nemo with us this afternoon, and he's going to talk about improving revenue management and providing operational insight, and with a focus on the data-driven culture at Kimpton Hotels. So one favor I do have to ask is we are recording the session, so when you ask a question, I'm going to run around with a mic and ask you just to use the microphone, hold it up to your mouth if you can, or Nima will actually repeat the question so we get it in the recording. But thanks very much, Nima, for being here this afternoon, and over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter. Again, I'm Nima Sharif. I'm Analytics Manager at Kimpton Hotels. I want to first start off by just thanking everybody for taking the time out and attending my breakout session. Just a quick story about my Tableau journey. So I started about 3.5 years ago, so 7.3. Got into the tool, and it worked really well for me because I am an Excel user and a SQL user and a Python user. So I found that the tool really fit a specific white space that I needed, and it's been great from there on. But let's get into the presentation. Before I do, I've got a fun little story to share, if I can get this clicker to work. All right, so a sales manager is flying over the desert, and he finds himself lost. So he looks down, and he sees a man on a camel. So he yells out to the man on the camel and asks him, "Where am I going?" Or "Where am I?" And the man on the camel kind of thinks for a second. He's like, "Well, you're 42 degrees and 12 minutes north. You're 102 degrees or 22 degrees and 10 minutes west. You're 212 degrees above sea level, heading east due northeast." The sales manager kind of takes that information and kind of digests it and looks back to the man on the camel and he says, "By the way, are you a data analyst?" And the man on the camel says, "Yeah, I am. How did you know?" He's like, "Well, you gave me accurate information. You gave me more information than I needed, and I still have no clue where I'm at." You know, then the man on the camel is like, "I apologize about that. By the way, are you a sales manager?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am. How did you know?" He's like, "Well, you have no clue where you're going. You have no clue where you are. You got yourself in this fix by blowing a load of hot air, and now you're expecting me to get you out of it." So show of hands of analysts, how many of you can kind of relate to that story a little bit, right? It's kind of this disconnect where the analyst and really the business stakeholder have this discommunication of information. The analyst has kind of worked hard to put a model together to help the business stakeholder say understand or provide some sort of insight in the problem, and the business stakeholder just doesn't understand what's going on. It kind of comes to kind of the idea behind my presentation. It's teamwork makes the dream work. So I'm going to share with you a story about how Kimpton used Tableau, and it was able to help drive it, I guess, inspire a data-driven culture. But before I go any further, the thing I always like to point out is that analytics, like anything else in our organization, is a tool. And you need a smart organization to take advantage of those tools to be successful. So it's really important to understand that analytics on its own does not correlate to success. Company culture does. So a little bit about Kimpton. Anybody staying at the Van Zandt? All right, we got some Vans. Anybody check out the property? It's just across from the convention center. We just built it last year, or just opened last year, so it's a jewel of ours. But for those of you who don't know about Kimpton, we're based out of San Francisco. We've been there for 35 years. We're the pioneer of boutique hotels with chef-inspired restaurants. We have about 65 hotels today with 75 restaurant outlets across 35 different cities, 20 under development today. And the big piece about our properties is that they're individually designed. And what I mean by that is if you go to the Monaco Portland, and if you go to the Monaco Alexandria, you're going to have an awesome experience regardless of the property, but it's going to be completely different as you see it. So definitely individually designed and design focused. But let's do a quick crash course of the agenda. So we're going to do a crash course 101. I know we don't have a lot of hoteliers here, so we'll get you up to speed. From there, we're going to talk about the problem that we faced last year. And then the discovery recommendation and like the execution piece is where Tableau comes in. And finally, we're going to talk about Tableau Online, and this is really our roadmap. So crash course, hotels 101. Two things I want to point out. So with basically hotels, especially when you're talking about top line revenue, you essentially have two key, I guess, levers or metrics. You've got occupancy, basically how full the hotel is going to be, and you've got your rate, how much you can charge. And those two levers will drive your revenue numbers, right? The other thing to think about is that it's the segment. So we have two major segments. The first is individual or transient guests. And basically what qualifies this guest, it's a business or leisure guest who individually arrange the reservation. And what I mean by that is you might call on the hotel, you might do a walk-in, you might go on the hotel's website, or you use an online travel agency. That's Expedia, Priceline, Booking.com, etc. The second is groups. So groups are basically rooms that are sold simultaneously at once. So this can be a wedding block, this can be a corporate group, this can be a convention block. So anybody think ahead and book their room 3 months ahead and use the Tableau rate? So you save yourself like 50%. So that was a group rate. The other big piece about group that I like to point out is the big difference between the two segments, a salesperson. So there's usually an on-property salesperson who's taking care of the lead. That lead comes in, and I always think of like the story of when my wife and I were trying to find a place to get married. You know, she was calling in a handful of different places. Those were essentially leads, and we were trying to figure out what's the right property for us. The other two big pieces about group, one is the value for the hotel. It comes with ancillary revenue. So banquet rooms, meeting space, catering. The other piece is it builds base. So this is kind of beneficial for both the guest because you're able to book ahead of time, you're able to get a group rate or a discounted rate, and then the hotel likes it because they're able to build their forecast, they're able to understand what demand looks like, and they don't have to rely on kind of that unpredictable transient guest. So as you imagine, the problem came with group business. So in 2015, we found ourselves with a group shortfall. So we saw a decline in group sales, specifically room nights. We saw a decline in group market share. So we were seeing that we as a property were not having our fair share of group business in our comp set as well as a corporate group all around. And we saw a decline in group conversion rates. Now, what does this mean and why is this a problem? So the first is the lower group base, right? So that increases the forecast risk for the property. The other thing is it decreases the ability for the property to drive compression. This is kind of, if you're not a hotelier, again, this is a little bit different, but best example is for those of us who made our reservation 10 days to arrival to Austin, you probably paid a lot. And the hotel knew that, right? Because they knew that the city's gonna be compressed, and if you're out of the group block, they can raise those rates and they can sell you that rate. So it's a yield strategy kind of piece. So the fact that you don't have that group base, you've actually now decreased your ability to drive rates in the long term. So at this point, senior leadership came to me and my team, and they essentially asked us, can you kind of understand this and can you come up with any recommendations? So we went about this two ways. First, we did like the quantitative analysis, right? We wanted to look at all the data that pertains to group, and we wanted to see it historically because 1 year really didn't provide us enough guidance. So we looked at three major data sources. The first is actual, actualized data, right? People staying at the hotel that are in a group. We wanted to see how are those stay patterns? Do they come over compressed periods? Do they come over low periods? Is this something unanimous across our portfolio, or is this specific to a certain property? The second was we cross-referenced this data with our syndicated data sources. So if we were really busy, was our comp set really busy? Was the market really busy? And did we get more than our fair share of group business? And did we perform better than our comp set because we were able to get that? So then we got a good understanding, but then from there we kind of took it even further. And I think this is where the amount of data that you can work with came in, with Tableau specifically, was huge. So we looked at actual leads. So if you think about going back to my example with my wife and I, she made a handful of reservations. Like she called probably 20 different locations, and a lot of those locations turned us down and we turned them down. Maybe they didn't fit right for us. Maybe we didn't fit right for them. Maybe they were full that day, maybe they were too expensive and it was out of our price range. And a lot of times she just didn't like the meeting space. But we were able to look at the actual lead data, and then we were analyzing that. And we were looking for actual kind of relationships. We want to see what's correlating. So at this point, I'm going to jump into a storybook, and I think this is the best way to show it. And this is actually what we showed to our senior executives. So this is kind of cool because you're actually seeing the data that we worked with. I'm going to put this down. So talking about the group data. So we looked at multiple attributes. Best way to think of that is your dimensions, if we're having like that Tableau conversation. So things like the lead source, the type of guest. So was it a corporate group? Was it a wedding block? Was it a social block? Was it a convention? When did it come? Was the property really compressed? Was it not? But the two things that we found that had high, I guess, correlation or a strong relationship with conversion was booking window and group size. So your booking window essentially is the lead time, or the lead time from when the inquiry actually arrived, like was made, to when my wife called the hotel, to the time that the group actually came to the hotel or was planning to come in. That was the lead time. The second is the group size. So that's just the total number of room nights for the group. So everybody that makes sense? Any questions? No? All right. All right, so this is a little painful. Okay, so booking window. So what was nice here is we took all our bookings or our leads, and we broke them into 3 baskets. So you're going to see 3 equal boxes, call them baskets, call them buckets, whatever you like to call it. But you're going to notice that the color changes from blue to orange. And basically blue is good, orange is bad, and blue represents a higher conversion rate. Orange represents a lower conversion rate. And this actually makes sense. So it's driven by both the guest as well as the hotel. So if it's a longer booking window, you have more time to choose, you probably are going to get to be more selective. If it's on the hotel side, they might be more selective because they don't understand what's going on 6, 7, 9 months out. So they might want to turn that business down because you actually have the propensity to displace higher rated business. And that's kind of a lack of information. Similarly, group size was the other piece. So again, boxes, we broke it up into 3 groups. You've got your small groups, which is less than 30 nights, your medium groups, which is the 31 to 75 room nights, and then your large groups, anything greater than 75. Equal sizes, color scale's the same, so lower conversion rates are higher. The lower conversion rates were for the bigger groups, the higher conversion rates for the smaller groups. Again, makes sense. If you're a large group, think about a big, if you have like a national event for your company, they're looking at a lot of different hotels. That might be $500,000 worth of business. So they, again, need to be a little bit more selective. Smaller groups, they're probably not as sensitive both on the hotel side or the client side. 30 rooms doesn't really displace anything. And then for us, because we are a boutique hotel company, not every group fits into the property. So a 500-room block will not fit into a 45-room hotel. It just physically won't happen. Okay. So now that we got the 2 dimensions, we were able to kind of splash this out and actually look at the behavior of our groups. So each basket, again, represents the size of leads or the volume of leads. The color represents the conversion rate. So if we looked at the first group, and I'm going to point out to let's use this thing, this group right here, and okay. So this group right here has high conversion rate, and it makes sense, right? Smaller groups they're not as sensitive. They'll make the reservation within 2 months booking window, and we love that type of business because we know that it doesn't displace anything. We have an idea of what the forecast looks like or what our demand patterns look like, and you normally see this really healthy conversion rate. The second one is that large group area, so a big box in the bottom. And again, going back to the points before, it made sense for us when we think about this more holistically. Sometimes it doesn't fit in our property. Sometimes the guest has a lot of options. And a lot of times they can be a lot more they're price setters rather than price takers. That's kind of the economics of it. So we noticed that the big block, the big Hilton next door is willing to take it for a lot lower rate, and we don't want to compete with that, so we kind of step away. Let's see if this actually works. Oh, great. All right, so now you're going to see something changed. So actually, let's go back real quick. All right, so at this point in time, we understand the behavior of that business, right? We know what our group business looks like. We know at what baskets it sits in. We understand the conversion rates within those baskets. Now let's look at year over year. So I looked at what was going on in 15 and compared it to 14. And I wanted to see if there was a change in, I guess, the rate of conversion. So the year over year change in the conversion rate. Again, same color scheme. Orange is bad, blue is good. So the first group you'll notice, you kind of see this L step. So that was the group that had the lower conversion rates. The decline in conversion rates. The blue group actually had an increase in conversion rates. So it kind of gave us a path to move forward and to kind of solve that problem. So the first group was called the short-term bookings, or things that came in within 2 months. We looked at that, and we analyzed actually what was the reason for the turndown. This is kind of the value of looking in our CRM data, and you have so many attributes to work with, so we can kind of break it up. And what we were looking for is, again, we wanted to see a commonality between properties, a commonality for turndown reasons. And in this group, we saw that, truthfully, there was a spike in short-term leads. And we know with hotels having the function of capacity, leads and conversion actually have somewhat of an inverse relationship. So if I increase my leads by 50%, my conversion rate might not increase by 50% because I get to price discriminate. I get to be more price sensitive or selection. I've got that on my side. And then this little guy right here, most of this was due to poor fit to property. A lot of these were those scenarios where it's a big group that wants to come into a small property, and it's some third-party source has kind of sent that to the hotel, and it just doesn't work. The group that really showed to be the problem area, though, was this middle, I guess, 2 to 5 month booking window. Most of them were beyond 3 months specifically. They all really shared the similar problem area, and most of them had the same, and most of the properties had the same turndown reason. So this was really interesting for us. So I'm going to go down and look at the turndown reasons. Anybody familiar with a bullet chart? Anybody use these? I'm personally a big fan. Save that real estate on your dashboard. Just to give you an idea of what you're looking at, the bar itself represents 2015. The green Gantt bar, which I can probably highlight, let's see. All right. Those green Gantt bars represent last year, or the 2014. The color, again, kind of staying with a theme. Orange is bad, blue is good. Again, I had to present this to salespeople, so I kept the language pretty simple. But the thing that really that stood out to us was the first 2 reasons. So you can see that those are the 2 top reasons why we saw turndowns, and they're kind of the most kind of burnt orange color. And really, it was due to the same thing. So it was either the client basically said, you know what, you're out of my price budget. I don't. This is beyond what I can spend. No, thank you. Or they said, this is beyond what I can spend. I'm going to go next door. Hence the location competitor hotel. So we knew that it's essentially pricing ourselves. And we went back to our properties, and that was where, again, we go to the qualitative piece. And at this point, we kind of talked to the properties itself, and we said, right, who is the decision maker? What's going on when you're looking at group leads? And the nice thing with Kimpton is we're fully managed, so we have a really close relationship with our properties. So what we noticed is really there's 4 people in charge on property. So you have your GM, that's the guy who runs the operations. You've got your director of finance, that's the guy who basically pays the bill, or the lady who pays the bill. The third person is your director of sales. Now this is the person who's in charge of getting leads, converting leads, both on the group side as well as on like the business transient side. The fourth person, which is something really unique to airlines and hospitality, or to hotels specifically, is the revenue management. Anybody heard of what a revenue management person, or everybody heard of it or no? So some have, some haven't. So the revenue manager actually sets the rates day by day. So again, if you were the poor person who had to spend $800 a night to be at this conference, you could thank the revenue manager. But they don't only set the daily rates, they actually set the full sales strategy. And that's kind of their job. And they're really the person who, and when we went back and wanted to see what documents they're working with, they had these giant Excel files, and they were putting in their forecast in this Excel file, and then sending it off to the GM who's running a 400-room hotel with, I don't know, 500 employees, who probably doesn't have time to actually like open up a 12-tab document. And then the directors of sales, who again is working with leads, who's on the phone, and really, I don't think it's, the ROI isn't there for them to be spending time in Excel either. So again, problem area. So now it comes to the recommendation. So we really recommended to look beyond 90 days, right? And it was kind of three things. We said you should be able to give them a tool to monitor their group risks and opportunity. We should be able to have them forecast beyond 90 days. And the next thing I have is actually some animation. So you're going to see the property's forecast move within the year. And then the final thing is price to demand, not to budget. So this is where a lot of people have questions, like why was their budget so high? So the dynamics with hotels are interesting. So the hotel's not usually owned by Kimpton. It's owned by some sort of financial institution. And that financial institution made some bets or whatever. They essentially give the property a budget and says, you need to meet these numbers. So if you're giving me if I'm getting leads 5 months out, I have to price to budget rather than what's appropriate in the market. Essentially, I'm pricing myself out because I don't have the insight to say, what is everybody else getting? So this goes back to kind of that revenue strategy. And that comes back to the revenue manager as well as the director of sales. All right. Any questions? I know we just went through a lot of stuff, so. All right, so this is where I'm gonna, basically I built a kind of an animation for you. And this is gonna be a little bit interesting to talk about. So as I was saying, I'm a big Python user. I love the algorithms. I do work with them a little bit. So I'm gonna kind of break up what you're seeing. This thing called spread, this is an algorithm that actually takes in multiple data points from the property on a week-to-week basis and is able to help the property understand their risks and forecast out 12 months, specifically for the group segment. So a big green box represents a big green opportunity. A big red box means that there is a risk. So that really resonated well with GMs and directors of sales and even directors of finance, because they can just say there's a problem there, let's talk about it, let's create a strategy. Pace is, again, something specific to hotels. So it's what's on the books today versus same time last year over a period of time. That sounds complicated, so we'll use an example. If I'm the Hotel Van Zandt, and this is the month of November, and let's say I have 100 rooms on the books for December, in the same time last year I had 50, so I'm ahead of pace by 50 rooms. That's represented by a big green up arrow triangle. If it's the reciprocal and I'm down 50 rooms, it's basically a downward triangle. And that's not a bad thing. So again, I'm from San Francisco. I know my properties in San Francisco are gonna be behind pace in February. Any guess why? Super Bowl, exactly. Super Bowl is not there anymore. So I'm not going to get that same level of compression. And my budgets should align with that, right? I shouldn't say I should hit those Super Bowl numbers and do 10% above. That's just crazy. But we should also address how much risk there is in that month. This is the forecast to budget. So this is actually the part you're going to see these numbers kind of change as I walk through the animation. This is the forecasted revenue. So the job of the revenue manager is to address their annual forecast, and they're mandatory to do the first 3 months every week. So up there you see January week 1. We're going to move out to about August, and you're going to see the forecast change, and you're going to see the risks change, you're going to see the pace change, but you're going to see this budget stays constant because essentially your budget shouldn't move. That's the number that your ownership group or you and your ownership agreed to. So that's that static number. So let's see if I can do this here. All right. I'm going to do this slowly just to walk you through, and then we'll walk through the animation. But let's actually first kind of point out the 2 areas that you probably are noticing: big risk, big opportunity, September and July for this property. So this is kind of a Kimpton sample property. This is actual property. And this is actual forecast, and this is live data that we were able to collect and extract from last year, and then we were able to run the scenario by taking various timestamps and saying, is this algo working? And of course we tested it and all the other fun stuff. But you can see July and September are, one's a big opportunity month, the other one's a big risk month. So let's run the scenario. And let's pull this back. I was running this last night to make sure it works. Again, I've kind of put that gold box around it just to point it out. So you could see week 2, something's changed, right? Everybody noticed that? So at this point, the forecast, the budget, there has been a variance. And also, when there is a variance, the numbers will actually go red. We're going to go week 3. Again, some changes. At the same time, they're not addressing the risks and opportunity in July. Look at that. Week 4, still nothing. So now let's actually play this out, and let's see it when they actually make changes. So now you're seeing the forecast change, right? The property's forecasting week over week, and every month they might move forward a week. So you're seeing that they're forecasting a rolling 90. Let's see if I can get at the right time. All right. So May week 2. There was an opportunity in July. They haven't really talked about it all the way out to May. That opportunity could have been seen in January. That probably could have been seen in November. But it took them essentially May to January. That's 5 months. So we're talking about roughly 20 weeks that they couldn't have made any changes. They couldn't have done some sort of yield strategy and make sure that they made the most amount of money. The other place that they could have done, or they need to do something, is September. So at this point in time, 5 months in, we haven't even looked at September yet, or they haven't adjusted their forecast appropriately. So at this point, I think I'm going to go a little slower. So we're in week 4. Now we're going to be in June. So June, they see some risk. And this is kind of weird, actually. So if you look at July, big opportunity, but they're forecasting a downturn, which is, I always think is really odd. And we went back and we kind of asked why. And we'll talk about it. But the thing was is they took a bad group. So does everybody see that? It went negative. They said, we're going to be short to budget 30 grand. Week after, oh, now we're going to actually beat it by $168,000. Think about that variance, right? That's a pretty big jump, and it made no sense to me. So they're ahead of pace. They probably picked up something, and then it's dropping again. Now it fell, and there's an opportunity. It went down to, I'm going to beat budget by 17 grand. Now it's back to negative. So when we asked them why this happened, the group washed, and there was no agreement with the group to like attrition clause. It was a group that might have been with like CNN or something like that, and they might have some sort of global agreement. But at that time, if it was way out ahead, they could have made some agreements with that group to protect that month. At the same time, there's this $200,000 shortfall in the month of September, which they're going to miss their budget by probably 50%, and they couldn't actually. They could have done something way out here to say, I need a sales strategy. Maybe we need to lower our rates. Maybe we have to understand what's going on to protect that month at the best way they can.
Do they have the ability to run campaigns or?
Of course. The problem is that in my first scenario, so as we know, 2/3 of my leads are coming in outside of basically 3 months. So all the business that, if I'm in this area right here, I should just use the pointer before I blind myself. If I'm here and I see this risk in September, I'm way outside of my booking window to actually do something. If I'm here, I can run multiple campaigns. I can see what sticks. I can, do some sales calls. I can do a shift in strategy. Maybe I'll go for a transient segment strategy. I can call Priceline and try to get business in there. But the problem is if they're not changing their forecast, that's telling me that they're not looking at that business. Because at this point, we have like an ODBC connection to that Excel sheet, and we just pull that data every week. So we know that they're touching their document. We know who's touching the document. We know when they touch the document. So we extract that on a week-to-week basis. So that was the problem. So now it's the point of, and again, just to say this, we're going back in time. They didn't have this. So please don't be mad at the property for doing that. They didn't see this before. So the question is how do we implement this thing with the algos in the background and into a report that they use every day and continuously look at, right? And it can be shared across the brand. All right, let's see if I can get this out of here. All right. Okay, where are we? So, the solution was the Monday report. So one solution I have about Tableau to make it really stick, don't introduce a new report. Find an old report that everybody uses up to the executive level and just replace that. And it just blows people's mind because you get so much more adoption because everybody's used to seeing it. And then the next thing to do is get rid of the old document so they have no other choice, so you force them to look at that. And if they're asking you why, you can tell them why. So we wanted the properties to learn to forecast beyond 90 days. We wanted to, basically our solution was we need to produce a report or a dashboard that managers can review their forecast and see it in detail. We need them to understand their risks and opportunities beyond 90 days. We need to incentivize the properties to price to market rather than budget. That's like the big no-duh kind of moment, right? So the execution, upgrade the Monday report. So you guys are probably, what the hell is the Monday report? And then introduce the spreader. So that document that you see, that's called the spreader. We love to name things. It's fun. So this is a snapshot of the Monday report. It's basic, it's old, it's 10 years old. It's a document that actually the executive would love to see it as a PDF and an Excel document. It's limited in scope, right? So you can't see group or transient, regardless if you are a property that does $40 million a year or more. I mean, hotels can drive a lot of revenue. It was slow and an inefficient process. So we didn't really capture all that data. Now we capture that entire forecast every week, and we store that in our database, and then we run analytics on that, and that gets pumped out to Tableau. And then there was just data integrity issues. Because it was somewhat like you would actually, the revenue manager would open up their computer, they would insert these numbers, and then that would go into the system. A lot of times if your rate, or we call ADR, let's say for the month is $200, they might accidentally put $20 or $2,000. Just these, I guess, just like 10 key mistakes, and you had to go back and fix it. The other problem is that the data didn't come in together. So if I look at what's on the books today, and another property showing me what was on the books 3 days ago, there's still going to be some variance. So it was really important that we kind of unify everything. So we introduced what the Monday report is, and I'll pull that up. I don't want to take up too much time and flash off, throw out reports and stuff like that, but just give me one moment. Okay. All right, so this is the Monday report. It has all our properties. We gave them that same view. Then we're like, okay, now you get the segmentation view. You actually have this online. You see it by region. You get the annual view. You can actually see how your forecast is changing by your budget. You actually have that spread calculation. This is great. Executives love this. They can dive in. If you're a regional, you can focus on your region. If you have online, you can save that unique view and keep it for yourself. And then we could even do it on a property part, but this is really the moneymaker. This is the spread. So the properties are able to see their spread every week and see this beyond on a rolling 12-month basis. So they can always say, there's a problem in September, in December, or in November and say, I see an issue. Are we talking about this? The GM can really call out the sales manager in their monthly group meetings and say, can we talk about this? Is there an opportunity? Or do we need to lower rates? Because I can't quote these high rates. And basically, it's kind of a, it's kind of a funny term, but we say like the last minute, you have to drop your rates, and we call it like drop your pants, and have to give your rates out to like opaque guys, right? So you have to send it to like your Expedias and Priceline. And if you're here, Expedia and Priceline, we still love you, but you don't have to give up those rates at lower rates as well as high margins, right? They're taking their cost of acquisition for a guest is probably 20 or 10x than ours. So we can basically protect ourselves a lot easier. Okay, so what happened? We were basically able to kind of get away from the, let's call it the camel riding analyst dilemma, right? We were able to produce a report that updated a legacy report, provided managers with a new way to look at their business, and introduced new techniques for their properties. And then, today managers are constantly forecasting beyond 90 days. Actually, today our properties have a day every month, or 2 days every month, where those 4 key people, the DOS or Director of Sales, the GM, the Director of Finance, and the Revenue Manager, have a meeting and look at the forecast 12 months out and say, do we see holes? If not, should we dig in? Should we see where there's an opportunity? Should we not? And that's something that we're doing, and actually our share numbers have really improved this year. Our group numbers have improved. Now, there are certain properties, of course, that it's harder to get them to adopt it, and that's always the challenge with things, but it's been a success, and it has helped us to become more data-driven, right? I think sometimes with properties specifically, when you tell them data-driven, they think in their head, you're gonna expect me to do a giant sum-ifs formula and VLOOKUPs and pivot tables on an Excel document that I don't have time to look at, but the fact that you just give them colored boxes, they love that. So it was a lot of success. And as it relates to next steps, all right, let's see if this works. That work? Okay. So next steps, we like to expand the use of BI. So predictive analytics, going back to what we were saying, we were mainly a SQL and a Python house. We love Python. We've used it for about a year and a half. Before that, we messed around with R a little bit. But we do the predictive analytics. We're taking that machine learning pieces and embedding it into Tableau within different disciplines. So the next kind of thing we're tackling is looking at our loyalty data and helping our people in charge of loyalty to give them maybe smarter analytics instead of just feeding them what's out there. And then embedding that analytics within other products. So Salesforce is an example. For us, we use Salesforce if we do provide some analytics, both on, I guess, the corporate reporting side, but then we can bring it on property for, let's say, an idea that we have is like, if you come and check in and we can flag something and says, this person has the probability of becoming a really special guest. And we know that the check-in experience is probably a high touch point for the guest. So if we can make sure that at check-in, and we're really good at this. We usually have great satisfaction scores. If you stayed with us, you would love us. I will tell you that right now, so don't be afraid to stay with us. But we know that if we can make sure that that point's really powerful, that person's gonna stay with us again. And that helps us just in regards to decreasing churn and things like that. So Tableau online adoption. So this was, again, kind of a project with Tableau. And just to give you kind of the state of the union for Kimpton, we have a few desktop users. We have about 20 online users, and it's usually top level. We have I hope the sales manager's not hearing it. We have like 700 reader licenses as well, and I think a lot of us have seen that. Now we're going to a place where we're going to take off a lot of those reader licenses, provide data Tableau Online, and then actually provide them real-time reporting. So a lot of the reports that somebody would build out of, let's call it like Excel, and it would take them hours to do. And even though we've optimized that with so many macros, we're going to just take that off their basically plate and put in an analytics solution through Tableau. So we loved it because, especially for our budgeting process, it's a little bit weird. We kind of make recommendations like, you should buy 2, but we don't have a full allocated number on the corporate side. So it was kind of plug and play. If you want to have some fun and get on Tableau Online, go ahead and buy a license. At that point, a stream of events should happen, and you should get a license. You might get a white paper, some training. And we loved it. It works really well for us. We find that AWS is really secure, and working with, I guess, our IT team as well as our account managers, they were able to really just give them all the information they needed. It was all PCI compliant, so that was fine. And the best part is it stores a ton of data. We didn't have any issues with having to hold it on our side. So today we're looking at expanding that tool across all our commercial disciplines. That's sales, marketing, loyalty, revenue. And the most fun thing, especially with Tableau 10, is it's so awesome that you can enable your team members to create their own views and answer their own questions. So it was pretty cool that they can now publish it, and I think we're going to get great feedback. So teamwork makes the dream work. We found that Tableau is more than just a data viz tool. It's a platform for us to understand our business problems, produce solutions, and an instrument that really empowers people to answer their own questions. I guess that's all I've got, so thank you.
So folks, any questions for Nima? We've got plenty of time, another 15 minutes for the session. I'll come over to you with the microphone if you have a question.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about any of the training that you provided the hotels so that they could make the most out of the new tool?
Yep. So our question was about training and what we used. What we're doing is we have a YouTube channel, and we just record our screen and talk through it. And with all these kids recording basically recording their screens for gaming, you can find that tool for free. So we just record it, we walk through it, we try to keep it 4 minutes or less, and we're deploying now a slew of videos. At the same time, I was having the opportunity to go to the GM conference and the finance conference where we do breakout sessions. So one of the breakout sessions was this, and this tool specifically. It was a little bit of hand-holding because there was this weird number that they're like, I don't understand how you get this. And we're like, trust it, it works, it's great. So that was a little hard. But yeah, I think that works. And then the training videos and white papers. Especially with Tableau Online, December is kind of our big go live date that we're going to bring on 150 members. So we're looking to we've published a handful of videos. We want to explore that to probably 10 to 15 videos. We also do recommend using the Tableau Online videos themselves. I basically learned on that stuff. And then white papers. It's really important for us to let them know what's in that data source and what those fields mean. The other thing is especially on the editing side, I find that I really want to avoid where people who, server users, are building their own calculations. Not to say that they don't know how, or that they shouldn't, but I think that if we can create all those things and their job is more just dropping and dragging pills rather than opening up a calculation and creating an LOD calculation or creating a window average or creating some sort of, the lookup calculation, it's hard to do it. Now with the new stuff, with the new Tableau stuff, that's really exciting because now we can see what new calculations work, and that's something that I'm definitely going to take advantage of. Go. Anybody else? Yeah.
So you talked about like for example, you have data in Salesforce. I presume you have data in the reservation application, etc. So I was just curious about how did you pull all that data together? Did you use direct connectors, or did you have stuff to put in a data warehouse?
We run our own schema. So we run on SQL Server, and we prep our own data. So they're all my protocols and they're all my views that we're building, and it's thousands of lines of script that we do that. For the Salesforce piece, and if you are using Salesforce, this is like, you might be doing it, but my recommendation, and I've gotten the same recommendation for other people who work with Salesforce, if you've got the same recommendation from Salesforce when they use Tableau, put it into a SQL Server. Your IT should, in general, like it's good practice to make a copy, then run on that copy and build views off of that. And data blending within SQL Server instead of Salesforce is a lot easier, especially if you have a production environment. So today we are getting away from that because we were noticing that our, especially our loyalty program runs on Salesforce, and they were finding a lot of performance issues to the point that a manager is getting up in the middle of the night and running a report because they don't want to displace the production environment. So make a copy and then run it from there, and then you can blend at that point. And I prefer blending everything, and truthfully, I run everything in SQL, prep all the data within SQL and send it up. Even the Python stuff, I run my calculations within Python, then push the data source into SQL, like I write it in there, prep it, and then send it. And then it's a job. So then Tableau just knows to refresh every day. Other questions?
Any other questions? Well, thanks very much for attending this afternoon, and thanks, Nima, for your presentation. Appreciate that.
Thank you.